the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewbs. This is Dewbs & Co. 160 million quid, that is the price tag of today's anti-social behaviour crackdown. This has been announced by Rishi Sunak. It's got all kinds in it. People are picking up on different aspects. So, for example, banning laughing gas. Are you in support of that? Moving on, beggars, making that easier. And if you do indeed indulge in a side habit of graffiti or anything like that, you're going to be made to clean up after yourselves. You might even be fined a few quid as well. What do you make to it all? Do you think we'll ever stamp out antisocial behaviour? Or is that idea for the birds? And over in Scotland, we have ourselves a new SNP leader. Humzaf Yousaf is now the leader. What do you think to this? What will be the future of Scotland under his leadership? Many are calling this basically a win for Labour today. Do you agree with that? And second jobs. That conversation about whether or not MPs should be allowed to have them has come around again, because did you see the goings-on over the weekend of, I have to say, it was largely Tory MPs asking for eye-watering sums of money, £10,000 a day. You what? Gotta be honest, I think I'm in the wrong job. But do you think they should be able to earn that kind of money, or at least aspire to, outside of their day job of politics? And I might also talk about strip searches tonight. What on earth is going on? Racist is the cry. Is it? Is that what the policy is? Your thoughts on all of the above. But first, let's bring ourselves up to speed with tonight's latest headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Michelle, thank you, and good evening to you. Our top story on GB News tonight. Humza Yousaf has been elected as the new leader of the Scottish National Party, taking over from Nicola Sturgeon. Scotland's Health Secretary claimed victory over Finance Secretary Kate Forbes and former Community Safety Minister Ash Regan with 52% of the vote. And at 37 years old, Mr Yousaf is set to become Scotland's youngest First Minister, and he's the first holder of the position to come from an ethnic minority background. Speaking at Murrayfield today, he said he was honoured to be entrusted with the party leadership.
I'm not just humbled of that, I most certainly am. I also feel like the luckiest man in the world to be standing here as the leader of the SNP, a party I joined almost 20 years ago and that I love so dearly. Friends, it was the late John Smith, and he got it absolutely right when he said, the opportunity to serve our country is all we ask. To serve my country as First Minister will be the greatest privilege and honour of my life.
Humza Yousaf speaking there. Well, the Prime Minister today said he's taking a zero-tolerance approach to antisocial behaviour. During a visit to Essex, Rishi Sunak unveiled a £160 million scheme that's going to include forcing offenders who graffiti or commit vandalism to clean up their communities. The government plans to make laughing gas, a Class C drug with nitrous oxide, banned before the end of the year. The Prime Minister said the current restrictions on the gas weren't working.
We're going to do over the course of the spring and the summer is consult on the best way to do this to make sure that it is effective. Tackling supply is important. That's why we've gone out after county line gangs and disrupted 3,500 of them. It's why we've toughened up sentencing for drug supply. It's why the police have got those things called Project Adder, for example, which is a national programme to target drug gangs in particular. So all of those things help deal with supply. We need to get the consultation right.
Well, Deputy Speaker of the House of Lords, Baroness Helen Newlove, says the crackdown should really start within education.
We've heard these measures before, and actually I welcome any measure that would stop antisocial behaviour, but there's nothing new in this that's already out there, and we've got to have the resources and people, the enable policing, and they mentioned probation officers, well, that's on its knees as well. So, no, I don't think any of these policies are new, and we're still going to struggle to tackle antisocial behaviour, most importantly with police who class it as lower level.
Now, Jeremy Corbyn says Sir Keir Starmer has denigrated the democratic foundations of the Labour Party by taking forward plans to block him from standing for the party at the next general election. Tomorrow, Sir Keir Starmer will propose a motion at a meeting of the party's ruling body to prevent the former Labour leader from being endorsed as a candidate. Mr Corbyn has been a Labour MP for Islington North in London since 1983. He says he's been proud to represent his community and says he's not going anywhere. The Duke of Sussex and other celebrities, including Sir Elton John and Elizabeth Hurley, have finished their first day of preliminary hearings at the High Court in London. Prince Harry and the other claimants launched legal action against associated newspapers for unlawful information gathering. The newspaper group denies the allegations, which include hiring private investigators to place listening devices in cars and homes and record phone calls. Lawyers for the publishers of the Daily Mail say the privacy claims are stale and should be dismissed without a trial. And news coming to us within the last hour or so, 5 people, including 3 children, have been killed after a shooting at a school in Tennessee in the States. That's according to a hospital spokesperson. Nashville police say the gunman at the Covenant School in Nashville has been shot dead. The private Christian secondary school has around 200 students. And staying with international news, in Israel, the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, will delay his controversial judicial overhaul after widespread rallies in the country. Hundreds of thousands of people have been taking to the streets in protest at his proposals, which they say would weaken the courts. The Prime Minister's hard-right coalition partner, Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, says the plans will be now looked at after the Passover parliamentary recess. Apologies for the sound levels on that last piece. Now, environmental charities and experts say an oil spill in Poole Harbour could have a devastating impact on sensitive nature reserves in the area. Around 200 barrels, we understand, of fluid, which includes crude oil, leaked from a pipeline feeding the Witch Farm onshore processing facility, leading on to a major incident being declared. Poole Harbour commissioners now saying the pipeline operated by the gas company Perenco has been shut down. Specialist oil spill teams have moved in using drones, boats and helicopters. They're working now to identify further spills and assess the risk to the environment. We'll have the latest on that for you when we come back at 7 o'clock with more news. But now let's get back to Michelle and Dewbs & Co.
Hi there, thanks for that, Polly. I'm keeping you company right through till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, Charlotte Pickles is the director of the Reform think tank, and John McTernan is a political strategist and former advisor to Tony Blair. Welcome to both of you this evening. And you know the drill at home, don't you? It's not just about us three. It's very much about you at home as well. What's on your mind tonight? You can get in touch all the usual ways. GBViews at gbnews.uk is my email, or you can tweet me as usual at GBNews or at Michelle Dewbs. We've just been talking about the upcoming topics. Lots of you already talking, particularly about the SNP issue tonight. What do you think to the new leader? Maureen's not mincing her words. She says, Humza is better known as Humza Useless here in Scotland. She says his track record is appalling, and you reckon he's going to make the position of First Minister a laughing stock. Oh, blimey, strong words there, Maureen. Does anyone disagree with that sentiment? Are you in Scotland tonight? I'm particularly interested in hearing from you if you are. Are you feeling happy tonight? Did the right guy win or not? Let's move on to our top story, though. Rishi Sunak has unveiled his action plan to tackle antisocial behaviour. He's basically got a few different buckets going on. There's going to be a focus on urgency. We're going to be looking at offenders being required to repair the damage that they've caused quickly. Secondly, there's going to be apparently a zero-tolerance approach, especially towards drugs. And thirdly, he's going to give the police more powers. Got to say, though, Labour have basically accused the Prime Minister of nicking his ideas, or Labour's ideas. Have they, John?
It's back to Blairism, isn't it? I mean, I was on the show last week talking about Blair, and we seem to be coming back to Tony Blair. Tony's ideas, tough on crime, tough on the cause of crime. But this is a bad reheating. It's stealing some ideas that Keir Starmer's been promoting, stealing some ideas from the Blair era, but there's nothing in for prevention. Youth services have had £1 billion cut from them. So this 160 million that Rishi Sunak is throwing into the pot is just it's a tiny, tiny piece of money compared to the cuts to youth services that are really good for keeping kids out of trouble.
Charlotte?
I think it's absolutely right to say that we need a focus on prevention and the causes of crime, as you say, that Tony Blair infamously talked about, as well as tough enforcement, which, you know, people want and is right that we should see. But I wouldn't be quite so dismissive. I mean, clearly in any of these sorts of government strategies, you can always go much further. But there are 1 million extra hours for youth services that this is going to invest in, which should make a difference. Clearly, we do need to, you know, we heard the clip earlier, we do need more on the education side. Actually, parents have a responsibility here, broader communities have a responsibility here. But ultimately, we know that antisocial behaviour is one of the top issues that people talk about. We know it has a tremendous psychological and well-being impact on people who are afraid to go through their local park, or, you know, have a neighbour that they're scared of. You know, these are really it's really detrimental to people's lives, and I think it's right that the government is trying to do something about it. Whether this works is a separate question.
And I find it interesting that you've almost come out and say, to me, almost excusing the behaviour of young people. So if someone goes off, I don't know, smashing stuff up, robbing people, whatever, to turn around and go, well, it's not my fault, I just couldn't go to a youth club. I always find that a lame excuse. And in 1997, the Labour Party published a white paper, which I found very interesting. Its exact title was No More Excuses. And they're saying to respond effectively to youth crime, we have to stop making excuses for the children that offend. And when I hear people, because I hear this argument all the time, oh, it's because the Tories have cut youth clubs, I think, oh, shut up, because it's no excuse not to be able to go and play snooker on a Friday night, that therefore that means you can go rob grannies instead. Don't wash with me.
But this is a really strange bag of ideas. There's the crazy nanny statism of making it a criminal offence to possess nitrous oxide. I mean, what kind of... It's illegal already to sell it. It's now a criminal offence. What are cops meant to do? Are cops meant to stop and search kids to get this off them? There's a very odd idea in here. We should be decriminalising drugs, not criminalising more drugs. We should have a completely different approach to all of this. And I think it will not be possible for the cops to do this. We're going to make people repair damage in 48 hours. That is just headline grabbing, but not practical at all. It's going to take a long time to process people through the courts, because the cuts to magistrates' courts, to all the courts, cuts to police, community support officers. You need to actually be able to crack down on crime, and I think Rishi Sunak got it himself this morning. You ask the public and they go, all you get from the cops is a crime number, so you can claim it on your insurance. There's something lacking in people's faith in the entirety of the system. Fix the criminal justice system, fix the cops, and then come round to this. This isn't the top priority of most local communities.
What do you think to this whole kind of visible justice notion? So getting your people out there in your high-vis jackets or your jumpsuits or whatever and making them scrub off. I mean, Banksy, he'd be busy for a long time to come. But anyway, aside from him, what do you think to it?
I'm always really torn on this. So if you look at what the evidence is of deterring people from committing crime, swift action is really important. So one of the elements of the plan today is this idea that people would be forced to clean up or do some type of community service within 48 hours of having been caught for perpetrating antisocial behaviour. Now, I'm afraid I'm with John. I don't see how we're going to possibly manage to do that. But actually, the visible punishment aspect of it, I think, probably does more for the victims, which I think is no little thing, because again, as I said at the start, you know, this can have a tremendous impact on people's lives if you're living with daily antisocial behaviour. This isn't just walking past a group of kids who are messing around. This is people's, you know, literally daily lives being disrupted. Whether the kind of high-vis jackets model will actually stop the young people from behaving this way, I don't know. I think if you could connect you go and break a window, you go and do graffiti, you go and whatever, hurl eggs at some granny's homes, and literally give this immediate response. I wouldn't trust a vandal to glaze a window, to be absolutely honest. But the thing is, well, and washing police cars, and I just sort of think
I didn't hear any apology from Rishi Sunak for abolishing ASBOs in the first place. ASBOs are being, we're returning to antisocial behaviour orders because this government, this Tory government, abolished it. Maybe they were listening too much to the Liberal Democrats when they got into office. But David Cameron had his whole hug a hoodie thing. And now we've got, what have we got? We've now got
But do you think
harass the homeless.
Worked? Do you think ASBOs worked?
Yeah.
For a good thing?
Yeah, they did work.
Do you?
Yeah.
Yeah. And do you not think that actually, when you look at what happened, so you ended up with so many people breaching their ASBOs anyway, a high percentage of people used to breach their ASBOs, so then they used to go to prison for breaching their ASBOs, and that prison sentence was worse than the crime in the first place. It wasn't a very good deterrent.
So this is... You're not being the bleeding heart liberal that thinks that people shouldn't go to prison. People just needed to stick to their ASBO. I mean, you get a sanction.
Care about ASBOs. This is
I bet they cared about going to prison.
Do you?
Yeah.
I bet half of them didn't actually. And in terms of like the whole concept of almost kind of shaming people out of doing crime, do you think that would work?
No, I don't think so, because I don't know where this is going to happen. It's like having a chain gang from the deep south. This idea of people in chains, people in uniforms, people in stripy suits to show that they're doing something. Those old high-vis community payback jackets. I mean, I never saw a single one, and I don't think anywhere in Peckham I saw a single one. I mean, I don't think that is. I think rapid justice is justice. So catching people and taking them through the court system. But it takes so long now for any offence to get people through the court system. And so many criminals game the system, they play the system, they don't turn up for... They get the case getting knocked on and knocked on and knocked on, and finally some victims give up.
But I think, Michelle, you made a really good point that actually this can't just all be the state's responsibility. So the idea that it's suddenly the state's responsibility, whether that's, local authority antisocial behaviour wardens that they're going to put out, whether it's the police that, quite frankly, should be focusing on crime, we do need to have a conversation about the responsibilities of individuals, as you said, of families and what they're doing, and how these kids are being brought up. We need to have a conversation about broader community action here, because if we just default constantly to someone else solving our problems, then costs do spiral. It tends to be less effective, actually, than having having someone close to you, having that conversation.
I do kind of think we pay the cops quite a lot, the police forces quite a lot, to actually tackle crime, and for them to pretend that's not their job.
We're not pretending that policing crime isn't the police's job. What we're saying is that actually a lot of these people need to look inward. And you say about shaming and it won't work. Let me just bring this image up, because I saw this image while I was looking into this topic today. Look at this. If you're listening, not watching, I shall describe what you're witnessing here. It's this young lad dressed in his tracksuit and his baseball cap, and he's leaning casually onto the back of a bus. And on the back of said bus is a poster. And it's him, it's the kid. The kid's called Adam Rooney. And this is in Cleveland, it's in 2006. There's a picture of this lad on the back of the bus saying, let's refuse to accept crime and antisocial behaviour in Middlesbrough. Asper. This is Adam James Rooney. He is prohibited from any form of antisocial behaviour and from entering the Pallister Park area. I can safely say, if you can't see this kid, Adam Rooney, he doesn't look like he gives a monkey about said Asper or his picture being on the back of the bus. So all this kind of shaming and all the rest of it, you might not have seen anyone in a high-vis jacket, but this was certainly going on. And one of the problems...
He's clearly not shamed.
No, but this is what I'm saying. One of the problems
we're agreeing with each other.
No, what I'm saying, I would have more of this. I absolutely would have people out there in their own communities tidying up after themselves, because one of the challenges is you have a whole pocket of society that do not want to function within normal society. They couldn't give a damn about things like Asper's, about things like high visibility and all the rest of it. So you have to somehow make them. You have to. I would have you in your high... Not you, but I would have you in your high-vis. I would have you there with your...
I've actually got an old community payback high-vis jacket. I cycle in it.
But I would have you there with your old toothbrushes, scrubbing the walls. I absolutely would. But the key thing, and I think it's the point that Charlotte raised, the families. Because what you have is a lot of these people that are creating this antisocial behaviour, when you actually look at their parents, and perhaps I'd go as far as saying their grandparents as well, they don't care. They're just brought up in these cycles. And when I showed this picture of Adam to someone said, well, I said, he doesn't look like he's bothered. And the response I got was, well, if he ever tried to get a job, I think he might be bothered if he's got a criminal record. And it made me laugh, because I thought a lot of people that kind of perform this behaviour, they don't want a job. They're not going to sit there and write a CV and go into the world of work tomorrow. So I'll ask you, how do you reach those people that perhaps don't have the same standards, the same values as the rest of us? Is this answer the right one? 160 million quid, do you look at that and go, yeah, that's a good use of my money? Your thoughts on that? Get in touch with me over the break, and I'll be reading some of your responses out in a second. And I'll also be talking about the goings-on in Scotland. The luckiest man in the world, apparently. Cool, blimey, he's easily pleased, isn't he? Humza Yousaf, I'm talking about. He is the new SNP leader. What's he going to do to fix Scotland? Does it need fixing? Your thoughts, and I'll see you in 2.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewbs, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dewbs and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Dewbs and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewbs, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewbs, keeping you company till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, Charlotte Pickles, the director of the Reform think tank, and John McTernan, a political strategist, keeps me company. Lots of you guys getting in touch about the antisocial behaviour and what we're going to do with it. There's a very common theme coming from you guys at home, which is bring back national service, Michelle. Many of you, because I was asking before the break, how do you re-engage the wrong-uns back into society? I'm just calling them that to be blunt, because you all know the kind of people I'm talking about. They don't care. They don't sit there and go, how am I not going to damage my future career prospects, etc. They don't care about any of that stuff. So how do you re-engage them? That's the question I've been pondering. Some of you saying, well, a lot of you actually, saying national service. Perhaps it doesn't even need to be military, because I can imagine anyone that's in the military will be sitting there at home going, yeah, no thanks, we don't want them. So maybe it doesn't even need to be military. Some of you saying, what about what they did in New York under, what was it, Giuliani, I think it was? Broken windows theory, they used to call that, and that did seem to be quite successful over in New York. Dan on Twitter says many people used Asperger's basically as a badge of honour, and they tried to see how many they could get, essentially. I think that you're absolutely right. Some of you saying it's all because of a lack of discipline in society. Many of you think that this problem will only get worse, will it? Your thoughts? Anyway, Humza Yousaf is now the leader of the SNP party. This was, of course, announced today. He reckons he is the luckiest man in the world. Interestingly, by the way, it was him and Kate Forbes. It was a 52-48 response. Of course, it has been accepted without any querying. Always interesting, that, isn't it? Anyway, is this the future of Scotland? Is it now bright under Humza's leadership? You're a proud Scot, by the way. I should make that clear, which is why I'm coming to you.
Look, it's definitely a brighter future for Scottish Labour, because you had your viewer who said that Humza's called Humza useless in Scotland. He was a terrible transport minister. The Scottish Government spent over £100 million on 2 ferries. Every year they add an extra 10 or 20 million onto the cost. The ferry's still not been built. There's all kinds of errors in his past, and he's a very angry man. He loses temper easily. You saw that in the debate. So I think it will be good for the Union, because there's not a strong leader in Scotland, and there will be a more even result at the next election. I think there'll be more seats for Labour, probably more seats for the Tories. And Humza Yousaf actually should probably call an election for the Scottish Parliament. He doesn't have a mandate. His party is split. We don't even know what he's going to do about challenging the UK government legally on the gender.
Why do you say he hasn't got a mandate?
Because you saw the split in the complete disagreement. Kate Forbes, who almost won, said he was a terrible health minister, said that the Sturgeon government's record is terrible and that taxes were too high. They're a split party. They actually need to resolve that by taking the manifesto, a new manifesto, back to the country.
Your thoughts on that? Are you in Scotland or Scottish, by the way? I'm particularly interested in hearing from you if you support Humza, because there's lots and lots of you getting in touch in Scotland. Some of you using words that I can't read out because I suspect there might be some kids listening or watching. But the general theme that I'm getting is not a necessarily positive one. So are there any Scots out there that are happy tonight and celebrating the victory? I want to hear from you. Charlotte, your thoughts?
The SNP has been a disaster for Scotland, an absolute disaster. And they've been so obsessed about pushing independence that they have almost entirely ignored the horrendous outcomes that much of the population in Scotland is experiencing. And Humza has been part of that over the last decade or so in, as we've heard, ministerial positions where he could have made a difference. So let's just take a couple of areas. Let's take health, where he was, until being picked as leader, health minister. Well, Scotland has the worst life expectancy of any nation in the UK. It has the worst rates of what's called avoidable mortality, which is essentially, if you get ill, will your healthcare system prevent you from dying? Scotland has the worst outcomes. It has the highest obesity rates. It has horrendous child poverty rates, which are no better than when the SNP took over. And it spends the most on health. It has the most doctors and nurses and beds in hospitals out of any devolved nation. It spends the most and gets the worst outcomes for people in Scotland. And education is the same. The worst outcomes out of any of the UK nations in reading, maths, science, and they spend more per kid than we do in England for worse results. So perhaps the SNP should...
from all the international tests.
Absolutely.
Which allowed you to get a comparison.
And scrap the annual surveys within Scotland because the education results were going down, so they just decided, we just won't tell anyone that they're so bad. So the SNP is bankrupt as a party, and do I think this is going to make a difference? No. The only thing it will make a difference to is exactly what John said, is them losing seats at the next election.
See, Steve's in Scotland. He says, I think it's a disaster, but be under no illusion, they will still get elected in this country. If it's as bad as Charlotte makes out, then why would so many people turn out and vote for the SNP? Is it purely just on one issue, the independents?
It is on one issue. And this election, the resignation of Nicola Sturgeon and this leadership election has cost them support. Support for independence has gone down to 40%. But if 40% of the voters want independence and they vote for the party that offers it to them, that party will win in first past the post. That party will win, be the largest party in the Scottish Parliament. And the truth is, to turf them out, it's going to require the Conservative Party supporting a minority Scottish Labour government in Scotland to clean up the Scottish government. And that'll be difficult for the Scottish Conservatives, be difficult for Scottish Labour, but people have to come together to push the nationalists out. They make everything about one issue, and so far that's allowed them to get away with the poor delivery on health, the poor delivery on crime, the poor delivery on transport, the poor delivery in every area which would normally drag down a government. Independence is so important for the 40% who want it. They ignore everything else.
At any cost? I mean, are you sitting at home, are you shouting at the screen that you want an independent Scotland? Because that's what I'm interested in. Independent at what cost? Because if Scotland is indeed getting run into the ground, but then I can hear you almost at home if you're in favour of what you'll be shouting, is it's not us that's running it into the ground. That you'll blame it, I suspect, on central UK government. You'll say it's Westminster's fault somehow.
But Michelle, let's be clear. All of those things I talked about, health, education, crime, it's the drugs death capital of Europe. All of those things are devolved, absolutely. And they are all already within the power of the Scottish government to be able to improve them, and they're not.
But they'll say yes, but that's because we don't get enough money from.
Well, they get more money. They get more money than any other.
Glasgow gets more money than Liverpool does. Liverpool has far lower drugs death rate. Same deprivation.
It is the perfect example of repeated policy failure.
Yeah.
Complete failure for the Scottish people.
Are you out there? Is there anyone that thinks today
GBNews
is a good
independent supporter.
day? Yeah, I'm trying to find somebody. I'm trying to find them. I'm sure that they exist somewhere. If you're sitting there and you think that this is positive progress for Scotland, can you get in touch with me, please? Because at the moment, everyone thinks it's an absolute disaster. So I am interested in the opposite side, if indeed it exists. Yeah, there's really. Archie says, the result today makes sure we will not see independence in my lifetime. I'm going to be 67 this year and I hope to reach 100. He reckons we'll have at least another 30 years in the Union. Yeah, there's not a lot of love coming through, I have to say. If you do exist and you love the guy and you think you're celebrating tonight, get in touch because I'm fascinated to hear from you as well. Going to take a quick break. When I come back, I want some more responses to your antisocial crime story because lots and lots of you are still messaging me about that. You think you know who is to blame for some of that, so I'll be reading out some of your thoughts on that. But I also want to ask you about MPs. Get this, £10,000 a day. I use the word pounds loosely, by the way, because some of them couldn't decide if they was talking about pounds or dollars, but I'll come on to that. Do you think an MP is worth £10,000 a day? And if so, for doing what? Second jobs, should they be banned? I'll see you in 2. I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Hello there, this is Dewbs and Michelle Dewberry, keeping you company right through till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, Charlotte Pickles is the director of the Reform think tank, and John McTernan is a political strategist. Good evening and welcome back, everybody. MPs, do you think they get paid enough? What is it now, about 85 grand there or thereabouts, plus expenses? That's quite a nice salary, isn't it? But apparently it's not enough. There's been a lot of debate and discussion this weekend because if you didn't see it, I'm going to play a clip for you in a second. But the former Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng, the former Health Secretary Matt Hancock, have been talking to an apparent South Korean firm about another job for them. Turns out the whole thing was a scam. programme, led by the campaign group led by donkeys. Before I get into the debate, let's just remind ourselves of the goings-on, shall we?
I would say, as an MP, obviously I don't need to earn a king's ransom, but I would do anything less than for about $10,000 a month.
I mean, do you have any number in mind that you were thinking?
Well, around 1,500.
1,500?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was thinking something like £60,000.
60,000 pounds. Oh.
As an annual rate.
I don't even think I'd get out of bed for any of that, quite frankly, but each to their own. Anyway, it all got very confusing, right? Because you had Kwasi Kwarteng, it's all online if you want to watch the whole thing. 1 minute he's talking about $10,000. Then he's on about pounds. Then he said it was a month. Then he said it was a day. So, I mean, you know, heaven help us, I think we dodged a bullet there with him not being our Chancellor, because his understanding of cash was a bit weird, if you ask me. But anyway, it's created this whole argument, Charlotte. People are saying MPs shouldn't be allowed these second jobs. Of course, Labour have jumped all over it today. Where do you stand on it?
This is a topic that we keep coming back to, isn't it? I don't think a straight ban of second jobs is a good idea. And you wouldn't do that in any other walk of life. So we wouldn't say to you, Michelle, you can't take a second job. You know, you wouldn't say to someone who's, I don't know, working in a business or who works in the public sector, you can't take a second job. So I don't think that is a reasonable position to take.
Hold on, because that's not like me. I'm not employed by the taxpayer, and I'm not going to be able to influence the Prime Minister. So these are very different things, aren't they? So your comparison of a business work and whatever, they're kind of irrelevant. This is a member of Parliament.
So I think you hit on something really important there, which is that influencing the Prime Minister. So what we can't have MPs doing is abusing the system, and there are rules in place for that. And so if someone, and we've got various things being investigated. The current chair of the Health Select Committee is being investigated at the moment for seeming to break those rules by lobbying on behalf of a firm, obviously from essentially abusing that or allegedly abusing the position he's got. But there are MPs who do lots of different jobs. So what about an MP who writes a newspaper column, or an MP who goes out and is a nurse in some of their time? What about an MP who does have their own business that has nothing related to their role in Parliament? I don't think it is right to say that they absolutely can't do a second job. Now, what I think we have to be clear about is that being an MP is a full-time job, and that the absolute priority for any MP must be representing their constituent and performing their legislative duties within Parliament. But look, MPs get holidays, MPs get some weekends. Actually, MPs work incredibly long hours on the whole. But they get some weekend, they get some evenings. Why shouldn't they be able to use that time to do something? And actually, one of the things we hear all the time is the criticism that MPs don't understand other sectors. So in some ways, doing something different could even be beneficial. But I think it has to be minimal. And look, do I think Matt Hancock or Kwasi Kwarteng is worth 10 grand a day? I'll let viewers decide on that.
People are worth whatever other people
will pay them.
Yeah,
it's a market.
Indeed.
So my view is, let's pay MPs a decent salary, pay them £250,000 a year, ban them from outside jobs, and pay cabinet ministers £500,000 a year. Let's just sort it out, take the money issue off the table and say, you've got a job, your job's working for the public, and if you have spare time, work harder for your constituency, or work harder for the government, or work harder for the opposition.
So £250,000 instead of 85k that they currently get.
Well, it used to be that MPs and it used to be the Prime Minister was paid far more than the editor of the Times or editor of any newspapers, and now the editors of all of our newspapers are paid far more than the Prime Minister. We need to readjust the salaries, and let's actually just buy out second jobs.
So you reckon if some of these people, and by the way, when you think about paying some of these people £250,000, I don't think some of the people that you've got in Parliament right now are worth a fraction of that. So maybe
you might change the people who
well, yeah, that's what I was about to say.
it.
Maybe you'd increase the calibre of people if the salary increased. But what about then? So you're telling me
peanuts, you get monkeys.
Well, you can give me your thoughts on that at home. So you're telling me you reckon then if these guys get £250,000, you think they'd sit there and go, that's enough money?
No, I'd just ban the outside jobs. So there's no conflict of interest. There's no, once you stop being in regular practice as a consultant or a GP or a nurse, you probably shouldn't be going on your odd days off back into hospital. I think you should be an MP, and if you've got any spare time, work harder for your constituency.
£250,000. What do you think to that at home?
I bet
And
it's
some of
popular.
you, by the way, at home will be sitting there going, "Oh my God, that's like an eye-watering sum of money." It is absolutely, of course, massively over and above the average wage in this country. But shouldn't we want people that are way over and above your average person in this country running the country? Do you reckon £250,000 would attract a different calibre of person? And do you reckon if they had that £250,000, that'd be enough for them? Do you reckon they'd sit there? I'm thinking about one MP who said, by the way, if you need to earn an extra 100 grand a year, you should probably go and get a different job. But it's come out now that he's got a job paying 100 grand a year sitting on this channel. So, I mean, make of that what you will. But, yeah, I'm fascinated. £250,000. I want your thoughts on that. I'm going to take a quick break. And when I come back, I'm going to give you some of your thoughts on that. That is my question, £250,000. Do you think that's what MPs should get? See you in 2.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewbs, and I'm keeping you company right through till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, Charlotte Pickles is the director of Reform think tank, and John McTernan is the political strategist. He's also the chap that came up with the idea a second ago when debating whether or not should we give MPs second jobs. What John was saying is, look, why don't we just increase the salary of MPs and then we perhaps will do away for the need for them to go and increase their earnings. The figure suggested by you was £250,000, so £250,000. Bob says, please can you ask him, does that include expenses or not?
The expense would be on top, yeah.
You get expenses on top. I'll tell you something that annoys me, and I think it's very wrong, is why so many MPs get properties in London that essentially are their own. So, for example, if you buy a property with the dime of the taxpayer and then you increase the value of that, that's your asset.
They can't do that anymore.
Oh, is that stopped?
The rules were changed, and so if you have your own property, you can't occupy it and charge the taxpayer. If you've bought a property in the past, you have to rent that out to somebody and rent some other property.
No, but say like if I'm an MP in Hull and I need a property in London for work.
The taxpayer pays no money
they'll pay rent. So you can rent a property in London,
but
the taxpayer covers the cost of the rent.
They won't help you mortgage.
Oh, right. Well, good. Someone's listened to my common sense at some point. Got there one step ahead of me. Right, so we've clarified that. John reckons that you would get expenses as well. Some people are saying this is way too much money. MPs are not worth it. Vince says some of the people are not qualified to sweep the streets, let alone qualify for £250,000. Ian has got a novel idea. £250,000 salary means that they can sit back and do the minimum amount of work possible. Instead, why don't you make it performance-based? Have a basic salary, and then you increase their earnings based on what they achieve. What do you think to that?
How would you measure them? I genuinely don't understand how you would do that.
They are performance judged.
They can get ejected.
Every 4 or 5 years, they have to go for reselection, and 75,000 people get to vote on it.
Yeah.
Jason says, wow, give them £250,000 for essentially breaking a country. £80,000 is a fair salary plus their expenses. And by the way, he would cap the expenses as well.
Michelle, can I just say on the expenses thing, because I think this is quite an important point for people to understand. So people think that MPs get these huge, vast expenses. Actually, most of that expense is spent on the staff, right? The caseworker that's helping the constituents solve problems, the constituency office. It's spent on the fact that MPs have to travel up and down the country because they have to be in Westminster for part of the week and they need to be in their constituency for part of the week. These expenses aren't perks. Yeah. They are core to doing the job. And I don't think any of the viewers out there would expect to be funding their own staff out of their own pocket or their own officers or office costs out of their own pocket. So I think we need to be a bit careful about the myth that MPs are getting huge amounts extra on top via expenses, because that's just not the case.
Does that reassure you at home? Do you hear that and think, oh, right, OK, fair enough? Some of you are comparing the salaries of MPs to the salaries of footballers. But the difference there is that the taxpayers are not paying the salaries of a footballer, are you? The Prime Minister's salary, what would you make that then if your MPs are earning?
£500,000.
What, just double?
Yeah, just
double. $500,000? Do you think that's reasonable for a Prime Minister?
Do you know what? I actually do. Yeah. So if you think about what we're charging the Prime Minister with, which is keeping our country safe, representing it on the world stage, which has huge implications for trade, for soft power. You know, he is running the country.
Growing
that would
the economy, raising our living standards.
And we can argue about whether that's currently happening, but the person in that role,
job description is gigantic.
Exactly, is huge. So £500,000, compare it to what someone running a medium-sized business might get.
Yeah, but then the Prime Minister is going to make his or her money post-office. Hence, you look in a situation now where you've got your Boris Johnson making an absolute fortune.
Boris Johnson's a bit of an exception, though, because Boris Johnson was already making a fortune before he came in.
Theresa May, she's making a load of money giving speeches.
But nothing, again, compared to what she would have done if she'd gone and run a country company. She was running the country. Again, dubious as to kind of how we thought the performance was. But if she had gone into another walk of life and gone into the private sector and had run a big multinational, she would have made, eye-wateringly more than she did going into public service. And whatever people think about MPs and Prime Ministers and government ministers and what have you, they are in public service. And I don't think just because that's the case, we should say we don't pay them appropriately.
Dean says, this has to be a joke. They are already out of touch with working class people and this will make it worse. Do you think that's fair?
I think they're not out of touch because they go and see their constituents every weekend. They go down to the constituencies. They get casework coming in. They get letters. They get people coming to talk to them. Most MPs know more about every level of what goes on in the country than most other professionals because they see the worst housing. They see the people with the worst poverty. They see the people with the most difficulties with the health service. They see people at a very desperate part of their lives. They get a very a very clear view of some of the worst things that are happening.
Though I think there is definitely an argument to say we might need a more diverse group of MPs. So we certainly do have a disproportionate number of MPs who come from very privileged backgrounds themselves. And incidentally, potentially having this sort of higher salary level might actually attract more people from working class backgrounds, more diverse backgrounds into becoming an MP and representing those groups that perhaps some people might think are underserved.
Someone on Twitter says, this whole issue with second jobs, it's all about jealousy, Michelle. People can't handle the fact that these guys can make all of this money. Don't know, are you jealous when you hear Matt Hancock asking for £10,000 a day? Do you sit there and think, God, I'm really jealous of Matt Hancock? I look at that, by the way, and I just think, I'll give your head a wobble, Matt Hancock. Who would pay Matt Hancock 10 grand a day, and for what, by the way? Lots of you still get in touch about the whole ASBER, antisocial behaviour. There's a real strong theme that's coming through today, which is a lack of discipline. And you say that's at home, so you're blaming the parents a lot and saying it starts with the parents. But the problem is, respectfully, I think you're missing the point there, because some of these parents, they're wrong uns as well. So then what do you do if your parent is sitting there, they don't install discipline into you, they don't make you go to school, they don't really care if the police are knocking on your door? What then? Some of you are saying it's a responsibility perhaps of schools. You're saying maybe schools need to kind of get a little bit more discipline into them. But the problem you got with that is if the school started trying to discipline people, within about 10 seconds, you'd have parents running into the headmasters crying because kids these days are brought up with safe spaces and trigger words and all the rest of it. So heaven help any headmaster that does try to install any discipline. So I don't know. I don't think we've fixed the issue and how we're going to stop antisocial behaviour, but I'm sure you'll be pondering it overnight. I'll wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning with the answer.
OK.
Anyway, John, that's all I've got time for. Charlotte, thank you very much for your company. Thank you for yours at home. Have a fantastic evening. Don't go anywhere. Nigel Farage is up next, but I'll see you tomorrow.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being